Hi students, and welcome to today's live IELTS class. My name is Adrian and I'm streaming to you live from beautiful Victoria on the west coast of Canada. I hope everybody is having a good week so far, staying healthy, staying positive. Welcome Pramod, Gungsur, Srivanas. I'm doing great, thank you for asking. Nice to see you, Huda. Good to see many students in the class already. Students, this lesson is presented to you by aehelp.com for academic IELTS. Please visit us there. And for the general IELTS, check us out at ieltshelp.com on both of our websites. We have lots and lots of materials, videos, strategies, practice exams to help you succeed. We have apps that work with the website so you can study anywhere, anytime. General IELTS Help links to gieltshelp.com, and Academic IELTS Help links to aehelp.com. In this class, we are looking at a task 2 writing, planning to write a band 9. We'll get through some planning in the introduction today, and then of course we will finish the essay tomorrow. It usually takes 2 classes to go through one of these essays in detail. Let me show you what our websites look like while we wait for a few more students. This is our Academic IELTS website here with the blue background. Click that big red button to get our premium package. It is a one-time payment for lifetime access. We are an IELTS registration center and British Council agent, so we know what we're doing. This is our general IELTS website here with the green background. And again, you can click that big red button to join us there. One-time payment. It's not a lot of money compared to the IELTS exam. It's well worth it. Lifetime access. You can use up to 5 devices. And we have writing and speaking help, of course, on the websites. Also, welcome Janil, Akshay, Kuldeep, Rashika, Nico. Nice to see many of our members in this class on time. If anybody has any questions, you can contact me at adrian@aehelp.com and I will answer your inquiries within due time. Let's get into task 2 writing. Here's our question for the day. All right, so firstly, read the question really carefully when you get to task 2. Make sure you start task 2 with at least 40 minutes to go. And here we go. Let's go from the top. IELTS task 2 writing. You should spend about 40 minutes on this task. Definitely spend 40 minutes. Many people believe the world is in need of a global government that can regulate universal tax, healthcare, and security. Discuss the advantages and disadvantages of this and give your own opinion. Write at least 250 words. Hello, Eugen, and all those little emojis. All right, so we've read the question. Now, it is an interesting question, to say the least. Let's first paraphrase this question just to make sure that we really do understand it. So paraphrasing the question means using your own words to restate the question. This isn't your introduction just yet. It's simply to understand what you are writing about, to think about it, to get some vocabulary going. So let's do this together. I'm going to paraphrase. You do the same, and then I'll check your work in the chat. So just put it in the chat. Try to be nice and quick with this paraphrasing, so don't take too much time, because of course you need plenty of time to write and also to check your work. So let's do this. All right. So I went into a little bit of explanation there. Here we go. While you're writing, for all of those listening, many people believe, a lot of individuals ascertain, the world is in need of a global government, that the global community now requires a unified governing authority. Okay, so I'm not just simply paraphrasing word by word, rather I'm looking at phrases, and that's what I'm showing you here. Okay, that can regulate universal tax, healthcare, and security, that can establish international tax, healthcare, and laws. Instead of security, I chose laws because obviously these would be criminal laws that would encompass all people. And then this part as well, just to make sure I'm clear of what I need to do. So discuss the advantages and disadvantages of this and give your own opinion. Write about the benefits and negatives of such a system and provide your own position on this notion. Notion instead of idea. All right. So now I'm sure that I clearly understand this. Dion says another way we could do it is certain individuals think that the world requires a global government that can normalize universal tax, healthcare, and safety. Right on, Dion. Make sure to really pay attention, Dion, to this part as well so that you're not missing any points in your essay. Zoji Akbar says, extrapolated imaging. Yeah, nope. That's totally off topic. Rajveer says, a lot of individuals ascertain that there is a requirement of an international authority to control global tax, healthcare, and security. Explain the benefits and deficits of this and state your opinion. Very nice, Rajveer. So kind of sticking almost verbatim, using a lot of synonyms. Nico says, certain individuals believe that this planet must be regulated by international governance in terms of tax, medical care, and safety. Very nice, Nico. I like your approach. It's quite different. Okay, good. Nicely done. Gus Adit says, some people are convinced that the global community requires broad administration that can set universal tariffs, healthcare, and safety. Gus, I made a few corrections there. Global is an adjective, global government. Globe, if you want to use it as a noun, Globe. Okay. Akshay says, a lot of people see the need for a global government nowadays which can regulate taxes, healthcare, and security across the globe. Janil says, certain individuals think that the planet must be addressed by one global authority to handle common tariffs, healthcare, and protection. Explain both pros and cons of this and give your own prospects. Or your own prospect is okay, Janil. I really like your use of the word address. Just you need a little bit of correction, but it's a good word to use. And I really like your paraphrasing of safety with protection, right? So security, safety, protection, those are good ways to paraphrase that. Fantastic. Okay, so let's move right along. What's our next step in planning? So once we have paraphrased, once we have clarity on this idea, what do we need to do next? What makes sense to do next, especially in this advantage, disadvantage, give your own opinion type question? What should be my next step as I'm sitting there looking at my paper or my computer screen? Nico says, you should identify the topic. So make sure that we're clear on what we're talking about here. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and Janil says, identify the topics and the controlling ideas. I agree, Kuldeep. I agree. So let's do that. So what is the topic here? What are we talking about? Okay. So what's the focus of this essay? And even if we should quickly identify the topic, we want to think about this, okay? Janil says, the topic is a global government. Yeah, I agree. So, what are we talking about? Global government. We can be a little bit more specific here as well. Let's see if anybody sticks another word in front of that. Kuldeep says governing authorities. If I were really picky, I would say that instead of just global government, the topic is the need for a global government. Okay, so that's what we're really talking about here. So if somebody says, what are you talking about? I would say global government, but more specifically, we're talking about the need for a global government, right? That will become interesting why that word need is there. Okay, so let's take it one step further and identify the controlling ideas. Controlling ideas should be pretty quick once we have the topic. Benefits and negatives. And of course, my opinion is going to be somewhere within those benefits and negatives, right? So that's where we're going with this. All right, now, especially when we're at home and we're practicing getting ready for the IELTS exam, we really want to go through our critical thinking, okay? So we really want to go through thinking about this as what, why, how, what, why, how. Those are the key questions that are so important to good discourse, good argument, and of course, good communication. So let's ask this firstly about the topic. So what is the need for a global government? Can anybody answer that for me? Everybody answer that for me. So what is the need for a global government? Okay. How would you explain that to somebody? So if I say, what is a need for a global government? Okay, King Solo, you're jumping a little bit ahead to maybe the why or the how question, but let's first address the what question. What is this need for a global government? Okay. Kuldeep, I think you're also jumping a little bit ahead to the why question. Why do we need a global government? And that would be to establish a healthy working society. Okay, Devansh, you've got a bit of it there. So a systematic policy around the world. Yeah. And I used this in my paraphrasing, right? A unified governing authority. Okay. Yeah, so the need, what is the need? So a demand by the world's population to have, I liked what somebody wrote there. It was a really nice one. Let's see if I can find that again. Yeah, so that was Sadesh Somni says a collective body that can take responsibility for worldwide issues. A demand by the world's population to have one authority that can be responsible for the world's issues and social systems. Yeah. So these questions might seem simple, and they should be. Your answers need to be accurate and detailed, and that's how you can really generate some good lexical resource, some nice grammar as well. So here, it's a demand by the world's population to have one authority that can be responsible for the world's issues and social systems. Okay, now we have a clear idea of what this need for a global government is. So let's ask the why question. Why do people want a global government? Okay, and I had a few answers for this for the what question. Kuldeep was among those, and a couple others. It's really important that you don't confuse the what and the why, right? Yeah, so Kuldeep says, like the WHO, which is the World Health Organization, that has some control over global health, but as we discovered in the last few years, not nearly enough, and not nearly enough control and knowledge, right? Okay, so Nico says it's a demand to maintain peace and safety around the world. So to demand peace and safety, sure. Why? Keep thinking. There's a couple of really good answers to this question, and when you get it, you'll be like, aha, that's it. Of course that's it, right? So here, what I would do in my critical thinking and thinking outside the box is, this is the thought that comes to my mind. Why now? Why not 50 or 100 years ago? So when you're not clear about the answer and you can't get good enough ideas, a really good trick is just to ask more questions around that issue, right? So Natalie says to have the same rules for everybody in the world, not in the country, but for everybody in the world. Okay. There we go, Rajveer. Very good. Due to increased globalization. Okay. And what does that mean, Rajveer? You might want to even express that in a bit more detail. Okay. So think about why COVID spread around the world as fast as it did, right? So visualize, think about those points, right? Okay, so of course, so that the same rules apply to all people on Earth. Also, the world has become a global community whereby individuals and businesses often reside in multiple countries throughout their lifespans. Okay, so if I'm thinking about this, right? Rajveer says countries are interdependent. Okay. Yeah, very good, David. So David Igerman, nice to have you on board. Make sure you send me an email, David, to hook you up with your perks. I think you just joined up, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so transportation's increased, and it's not like it was in the past where people maybe visit another country for a week or two and then they have a tourist experience and, hey, that was great, and then they go back home, like maybe in the 90s. But in the new millennium, it has really become common for people to just travel to another country for years at a time to learn, to live, to work. So that's become very, very commonplace. And same with businesses, right? So a business will establish itself in one country, move to other countries, move its finances around. So a lot of that's going on, especially in the past 20 years. So my answer to this question is so that the same rules apply to all people on Earth, of course. But why? Because the world has become a global community whereby individuals and businesses often reside in multiple countries throughout their lifespans. This word reside is important, right? Because we're not simply talking about travel or visiting. We're talking about living, and that starts at, let's say, 6 months. So when you have a company or an individual go to another country and they're there for more than 6 months, they're living there, okay? They're buying the local foods, they have a daily routine, and they're living there, all right? Okay, so let's ask the how question. So what's the correct how question here, all right? What would you ask as the how question? Okay. And this is an important one. So for the first two, I gave you the question. This time, I would like you to think about the question, because answering the question is half, or I could say one side of the coin. Asking the right question is the other side of the coin. And when you're practicing these essays at home, it's really, really important to be on both sides of the coin. This is why task 2 is more challenging than task 1, because you have to think a lot more. You have to ask a lot more questions in task 2 than in task 1. And the quality of your answer really matters in task 2 past band 6.5. So until 6.5, you just have to write good English. That's fairly accurate, fairly good spelling and grammar. But after 6.5, which is considered a fluent user of English, content becomes much more important. So what you're actually writing in your essay. Okay. Yeah, very good, Kaldeep. You nailed it. So how has this need come to be? Okay, so let's answer that. So how has this need for a global government come about? Okay, so what created? Okay, so how has this need for a global government been created? Okay, yeah, definitely. Okay. So think about examples here. So what situations have led to this need? Okay. All right. And what's your answer to that? So this is where you're thinking of some specific examples. And once you have this information, you are really going to do a much, much better job on your response. Okay. And Devansh, you can think about how can these global authorities accomplish this task, but I think that's another. Okay, so David says for sure COVID-19. Okay, so an inability to control pathogens. Okay, that would be a good one. Yeah, so we see that more and more in the past couple of decades. Of course, right now we're really experiencing it with COVID, but it's not. It wasn't the first. We've had SARS. We've had a couple of other signs or warning signs. So nature didn't just drop COVID on us. We did have a couple of other viruses over the past 20 years. I remember since the late 90s, and those were already causing some panic, but people didn't really read enough into the warning signs, and that's common human error. So an inability to control pathogens with local laws, yeah. Think about the question. So taxes, healthcare, and safety. Rashika says an increase in underprivileged in some areas. So some parts of the world becoming really poor. Yeah, Rashika, I think you're onto something. I think you can express that a little bit better. Yeah. Yeah, so Pumna says controlling crime, but even more specifically, Pumna, to this question, controlling international crime. So yeah, it's very true. So we're having a lot of difficulty controlling what we call terrorism and cybercrime, right? Rajveer says Apple is opening offices in India, UK, and Canada. Yeah, so for sure, Rajveer, you're onto something there as well. As many of you may or may not know this information, it's quite commonly known. Some of the biggest companies in the world, like Apple, Google, Amazon, don't really pay tax. They simply take their financial offices to tax shelters. I believe a couple of them are in Ireland, if I'm not mistaken, or North Ireland, and they simply don't pay tax. They make billions, if not trillions of dollars now, and some of these companies literally pay zero tax, while some of us make $10,000 and pay $3,000 in tax, right? Is that fair? Hard to control when you don't have a global government, right? So there's a lot of disharmony in economic and socioeconomic status, okay? All right, and so from this, now we can very quickly develop the what, why, how for the advantages and disadvantages, right? At least for the advantages, we can quickly get into it, right? So now we'll ask the question, what are the advantages? I'm sure many of you have come up with the answer that creates more equality. Creates greater safety, right? And health or protection for health, right? So those are clearly going to be some of the potential advantages of having a global authority governing us. Okay, so what are the disadvantages? Let's ask that question. Okay. So if we have one government controlling all of humanity, then what do you think might be a disadvantage of having such a system? Now, here you want to again visualize, think about it, think about maybe past history, some comparisons. Okay. So Sadesh says, cannot stay autonomous. Yeah. So there's definitely going to be a loss of national identity, right? So when you have one governing system, that's not going to fit everybody's needs, right? Because we come from different cultures, different backgrounds, which are satisfied by different kinds of laws and regulations, different kinds of religions. So it's going to be extremely difficult for a unified government to satisfy all of the needs of all of these different cultures, right? So Kuldeep says, might suppress local businesses. Maybe, but maybe not as well, Kuldeep. We don't know that, okay? All right. So, yeah, and somebody's writing, reduce the power of the local government, Manvi. Absolutely it would, because you would have a government that's above and beyond that government's control. So that's the loss of autonomy. Loss of autonomy meaning being able to make the decisions for themselves, okay? So Nico says religions and cultures will disappear. Okay, national traditions may disappear, yeah. So national identity, culture, yeah. Yeah, because religions themselves carry laws, right? And sometimes those laws are conflicting. So it's not an easy path by any means. No path as this would be easy. All right, and so we have our advantages. Now, let's take a position. So that's our next step, right? We have to decide where we stand on this issue before we can begin writing, because that's going to decide the structure and the flow of the essay, what we write about first, what we write about after that, okay? So I'm curious, what's your position? More benefits or more deficits? Okay. Now think outside the box. So, what do you think? What's your opinion? Let's see. Okay, let's do it this way. So, more benefits. Let's take a vote on this. So that'll be 1. And then more deficits, so more negatives for an international government. That'll be 2. Okay, so if you think there are more advantages for an international government based on what we've discovered or thought about, you can put a number 1 into the chat. And if you think there are more negatives to an international government, then put in a number 2. Okay. All right, Nasir says it's 2. Janil says it's 1. Manpreet says it's 2. Kuldeep, Ravi, Akshay say 1. King agrees about the benefits. Mandeep says 1. Rajveer says 2. Devansh is 1 and 2. You can't really sit on the fence on this one. Devansh, you could, but it won't be as exciting. Very interesting, students, and I'm not surprised by this. Notice that there are a lot of 1s and a lot of 2s. So the world is really undecided. That's probably why the world currently has a mix of international governing bodies and national governing bodies. So we do have Interpol, we do have WHO, we do have some kind of international tax business something as well. So it's a big mix. Isn't that interesting? If we're looking at the chat. Pamna, please just vote once, okay? So it's a good mix of 1s and 2s, all right? Very, very difficult. I'm gonna go with the 1 if you're curious. So I'm gonna go with more benefits. And my simple argument is I'm just going to stop there. All right. So this is my logic. This is why I've decided to go with 1, especially based on what's been going on in the world. I'm going to go with 1 because, hey, if a pandemic like COVID wipes out humanity, then nobody's really going to care who is this religion or who does that kind of dance or who has this kind of language. That's just in my humble opinion, right? It doesn't matter much. So if we have a more aggressive pandemic than COVID and we decimate humanity because we weren't able to communicate with each other, we have no international government that can tell everybody at the same time to stay at home, then it really doesn't matter what we've done or accomplished. So that's kind of my position on it, but to each their own, right? Maybe that's extreme, maybe that will never happen. Maybe. All right. Regardless, we do have to get a position and we have to create a thesis statement because that's next. Okay. So the thesis is basically an outline. It's a sentence at the end of your introduction which outlines the main points and arguments of your essay. Okay? And it's an interesting topic because I think this will be one of the biggest questions that we need to answer for humanity very, very quickly. Okay? We didn't even talk about the environment. So having a unified government to protect the environment. If I'm dumping nuclear waste and oil into the ocean on one side of the world, then it doesn't really matter much if I'm planting trees on the other side of the world. They'll die. Okay, so here it is. It's a sentence at the end of your introduction which outlines the main points and arguments of your essay. Let's put that together. So using all of the information from our planning, we can now create a good thesis statement that will tell our reader what we're talking about. So what are our points that we want to show them in the body paragraphs, okay? So before you write your thesis statement, it's always a good idea to review the original question, okay? So here's the original question. You should spend about 40 minutes on this task. Many people believe the world is in need of a global government that can regulate universal tax, healthcare, and security. Discuss the advantages and disadvantages of this and give your own opinion. We did some really good planning. We've got some great ideas. Now we just need to put these all together into one thesis statement. So go ahead, write your thesis statement. I'm going to do the same, and then we'll compare. Let's all kind of go on the side of a unified government for this one, even if you don't believe in it, just for practice, okay? And then you can try it the other way, arguing that it has more negatives. So I encourage you to try it. It's always good to have debate, especially with this kind. Pumna, you're going to be much, much faster when you practice this at home. And of course, you're not going to have me explaining every little detail. So it's not going to take you 35 minutes. This whole planning phase should take you about 3 to 4 minutes, maybe 5, in the official exam. Okay, so if I were just doing this in the real test, I would do this in 3 minutes. So I would just think about the question, quickly write a paraphrase, and then I would think topic, controlling idea. In the actual exam, you're not writing all of this down, Pumna. You're just writing down perhaps the paraphrase, that could be a good idea, and the thesis statement, okay? The rest of the information, Pumna, is happening in your head, okay? So here we're just thinking aloud. Our brains work a lot faster when we're not thinking aloud, right? So that's the idea. This is how you should practice at home though, Pumna. So on pen and paper, to develop this thinking and to develop this thinking so that you can think quickly like this is what you want to do at home on paper or on the computer, of course, all right? Summit says the advantage of a unified global government is more equality, while disadvantages are lack of control over population. I'm not sure where you're going with the lack of control over lack of population. I would imagine there would be more. No need to apologize, Sama. There's no sorry in IELTS preparation. You just do it, okay? No sorries, no thank yous. Just do it. And I like discourse, Pumna. I like these kinds of questions, okay? All right. Andre, I'm not sure what you mean by tactics, right? Baval, you improve your writing task too by having good content. That's one of the first steps. That's what we're doing here, okay? All right. I'm going to write my thesis statement while you're getting yours ready. So okay. So I did it in 2 sentences this time. Your thesis doesn't have to be 1 sentence, by the way. This is what I wrote, and then I'll read a few that I'm seeing coming up now in the chat, and we'll reflect. Okay, so although a major disadvantage of a unified government is loss of autonomy for nations, its benefits include a greater degree of social equality, public safety, and general health. For these reasons, I support the idea of a global government. Okay, very clear to the point. It gives a very, very distinct idea for the reader of what I'm going to write about and what is my position. Okay, David says, as many people believe that there's a need for an international government which solves world-level problems. World level, David, needs a hyphen between. You need to link those two words. Like global warming, there could be disadvantages like decreasing cultural diversity instead of variety, David, cultural diversity, as we become a single planet. Okay, David, I think you have a little bit too much information in there. There's not enough clarity. You want to really just stick to the points. Okay, then you can go into more explanations and examples like global warming later in the essay. Okay, I can't read the Cyrillic name. I really should learn the Cyrillic alphabet, but here it goes. Personally, I'm inclined to believe that through global governing authority, equality can be maintained in the long term, although this innovation may not fit with the needs of some countries. Okay, that's a loose thesis because I have a kind of an idea of where you're going with it, but not a specific idea. Okay. Notice how with mine, you have a very clear idea that body paragraph 1. So if I'm writing a 5-paragraph essay, then body paragraph 1 will be about the loss of autonomy as a negative. So it's going to be a negative body 1. Okay. And then body 2 will be the social equality, public safety, and general health. Okay. And then body 3 can be my support comparing these two. Okay. So explaining clearly why this second one is more important than this first one, because that's what I said, right? And I expressed that by saying, hey, if we're wiped out by a pandemic, then we can fight over who's got the right idea for education systems. It's not going to matter at that point, right? So my body 3 explains that, and then I can conclude. This can be a fairly short body paragraph. These ones can be well developed with more details. Okay? I hope that makes sense for everybody. Are there any questions about that thesis? So why I've created it that way? My first body paragraph is about the negatives because it's the side I disagree with. And then my second body paragraph is the side I agree with. So it makes more sense to link it that way. A lot of students spend much time on linking words and how to link ideas with words. You have to remember that ideas link ideas. So the most coherent way to compose your essay is through generating ideas that link together well and then structuring them well. Okay? All right, Jesse says, the main benefit of having a global government is this exceptional social security. However, the deficit is loss of autonomy for a country. Yeah, and then Jesse, what do you believe? If you believe the latter, then that's the correct way to do it. If you believe the former, then you should switch those 2 points around. Okay? Rashika says, however, the advantage of having a global authority is to establish equality among nations. However, the disadvantage is it can destroy the identity of cultures. I agree with the first. Yeah, so Rashika, that's a little bit of the way you structured it. You're jumping around. It's like this one, no this one, no this one. It's better to say this one than this one, I believe in this one. Okay? So that's better. Okay? Sumit says, some teachers say don't include points in the thesis. Sumit, I disagree with that because in such a short essay, you really shouldn't waste any words or sentences on generalized and unclear information, especially not when you're going for a band 9. So if you don't include clear points in the thesis, okay, okay, that's called an indirect thesis. This type of thesis is called a direct thesis. And generally speaking, a direct thesis is most of the time better than an indirect thesis. There are some cases where the indirect is better, but most of the time, 90% of the time, a direct thesis with clear points is better because your reader doesn't like their time to be wasted with generalized ideas. I hope that makes sense. In University Summit, especially, in university, if you write an indirect thesis, you have to have a really good reason. Otherwise, the professor will drop your score severely with an indirect thesis, okay? They might not even read your essay. They might just hand it back and say, rewrite it with a direct thesis. So for that, okay? Be ready for that, right? That's the difference between a direct and an indirect thesis. You can research that. That's not me coming up with terms. You can go on Google and Google. I actually encourage students to do that if you haven't done that yet. So Google the difference between a direct thesis and an indirect thesis. You should learn that. It's really good to know, especially for those of you planning to do your university studies. Okay? All right. So it's all logic. It's all standard literature, rules, and logic. So all right, now that we have our thesis, we can write our introduction. And we want to keep our introduction short, and we want to use the information that we did during the planning. Okay, so the introductory paragraph, and remember students, I'm showing you how to write a Band 9 essay here, so an essay with a lot of clarity and detail. Okay, all right, so the introduction should have a hook. And the hook should include the topic. So here, remember our planning, it's the need for a global government, okay? So I'm going to write a hook here. You can do the same. I'll take a glance back at the chat, and then we can compare it, okay? Keep the hook really simple, okay? This is my hook. Over the last 2 decades, there has been an increasing demand for a global government. And I think most people will agree with that. I mean, you see our world leaders meeting more and more often. You see more and more world summits and the G5 and the WHO. And so it's something that I think most people are aware of, and it includes the topic here. Makes my reader interested to continue with this. So over the last 2 decades, there has been an increasing demand for a global government. Okay, point made. Let's talk about this, right? So what's the definition and the need, right? So All right, so I have it all in one here. And basically my background is a simple definition. I'm just taking this from my planning, okay? So this should be very, very quick at this point because I'm simply just going and thinking about what I did during the planning and writing that. So over the last 2 decades, there has been an increasing demand for a global government, a single unified authority that can be responsible for the critical social systems such as medical care, tax laws, and safety legislature may better operate an ever-increasingly international community. Okay, now I use the word increasingly. I don't like that, so I'm going to paraphrase that a little bit. And instead of increasingly, I'm going to use the word growing. Okay, and now all I want to do after that is simply take my direct thesis and plop it in. Okay, so that thesis was not for none. Here we go. And now I have my Band 9 introduction. This introduction addresses the question and lays a clear path for the rest of the essay. Okay, so I'm going to read it over one more time just to make sure I don't have mistakes. And I've started teaching this in the past few weeks that you should review each of your paragraphs after you write it. That will help you to write the next paragraph, and it will also help you catch some mistakes. Okay, Pumna, grammar is very important for IELTS. Okay. So over the last 2 decades, there has been an increasing demand for a local government, for a global government, a single unified authority that can be responsible for the critical social systems such as medical care, tax laws, and safety legislature may better operate an ever-growing international community. Although a major disadvantage of a unified government is loss of autonomy for nations, its benefits include a greater degree of social equality, public safety, and general health. For these reasons, I support the idea of a global government. Okay. Now, I've said global government so much, I can probably just take that out of my thesis and finish off with, for these reasons, I am in support of this idea. Okay, and I can even use a little bit of punctuation to now connect my thesis into one sentence. There we go. Okay. All right. Andrei Uksov says, for the hook, global government is needed in modern society. Okay. For modern people. I don't know if I would say nations, Andre, because that's a little bit confusing with global government. Okay, so I would say a global government is needed for modern people. Okay. Devansh says to maintain healthcare, simplified tax systems, national conflicts, support from powerful countries, regulate international and national crimes, quality education system. Osman is asking, is it a global government or global governance? Both are the same, really, Osman. Global government is the entity. Global governance is what they do, right? So, all right. Okay, everyone. So great work in there today. Tomorrow, I'm going to be back at the same time, and we're going to finish this kind of provocative and interesting topic. I hope everybody else found it as interesting as I did. I sure find this question quite interesting these days, especially. And I will be back tomorrow. So we'll do the body paragraphs and we'll do the conclusion tomorrow. We'll develop the complete essay. I did see some good hooks up there, so that was great. Remember, everyone, aehelp.com, Academic IELTS. You can find a lot of our video lessons, practice exams, sample task 2 responses on our website. GIELTShelp.com for general IELTS. Do join the premium package. It's like 1/10 the cost of the IELTS exam, so it's well worth it if you're going to sit the test. and it is a one-time payment for lifetime access. So you can learn at your leisure. You're most welcome, Jaineel. Good to see everyone in the class. Nice participation, and yeah, it was exciting. That was a fun class for me as well. Much love to all of you. Take care. Always be respectful of each other and the world around you. I'm Adrian, signing out from Victoria, beautiful Victoria in British Columbia. Hopefully see you all tomorrow at this time. Bye for now.